Hey, Ricardo.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you perfect.
Great.
Ricardo, I think you might be muted. I think your audio might be, or your mic, maybe.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Okay, all good. Let's get this started. So, hello everyone, and welcome to the grand finale, the last stage of SciCon 2023. Last year we kicked off SciCon 2022 with Brian for a fireside chat. This year we're closing SciCon 2023 with Brian with another fireside chat. So first of all, Brian, it's really great pleasure again to have you here. Thank you so much for coming to SciCon 2023.
Yeah, thanks for hosting it. It's been awesome to see the community come together and been really a lot of really good progress. So thank you both.
Yeah, really excited to host this chat. And I would start from a development from last year. So last year we hosted the first edition, SciCon 2022, completely spun up by the community. This year we have the second edition. 1 year later, what changed at ResearchHub?
Yeah, Joyce, do you want to start off or you want me to jump in?
I think probably the biggest thing that changed is kind of our community. Like I think, over time just kind of been hammering away at like bringing in like talented people like yourself, Ricardo, and Tyler and Jeff and everybody else who helps to make these things kind of happen. So yeah, to me, the thing that's really exciting that's going on with ResearchHub right now is the people involved in the content that they're creating. So yeah, I think, just putting our heads down and trying to grow.
Yeah, and the pace of shipping has been really great too. The team's been crushing it, all based on your feedback from the community. So the citation manager got out there. The number of RSC that you get for every upvote is now kind of a floating exchange rate. You may have noticed that we're sort of distributing about 5% of the RSC per year. And, so upvotes, you get a lot more RSC now. That was good. We just put out Hubs V2. There was a big fundraise that happened, which was a big milestone for ResearchHub. So the number of kind of weekly active contributors has been going up year over year. So it's been really good to see the slow, steady progress from this initial seed of a small community.
Yeah, what I can tell you is that it is evident that the community is growing. Like from someone that uses the platform every day, you can see that the content is increasing. You see new faces. You see some really interesting, like even experiments. People that try out different things. So with the LK99, we started collecting papers, and now we have, the peer-to-peer review initiative. So really a lot of stuff going on at the same time, which makes it really exciting, especially for newcomers that comes into a new platform. They see it as a, Reddit style kind of platform, and then they discover this plethora of like many things that you can do on ResearchHub. So really exciting. You just mentioned the fundraising. So let me touch on this a bit, because we just had last week a panel, an investing in DeSci panel, where we had a few guests, which also, who also invested in ResearchHub. And so maybe something that I wanted to ask you is how, important it is to, choose the people that back your project. What was for you the decisive factor, the most important factor in choosing the people, who decided to back ResearchHub?
Yeah, well, I'll start off, and Joyce, feel free to jump in. I mean, I know you met with a lot of these people too. Well, I guess the first thing is that, ResearchHub has been self-funded so far, and that was a great way to get off the ground. But, it's always useful to get other people around the table who have experience building applications to make sure that you're not stuck in your own groupthink, or, you're not diluting yourself. And so it's an interesting group of investors out there that are excited about DeSci. They're interested in the intersection, obviously, of things happening in crypto, but also with scientific research. And it's a really cool community of people in DeSci. It's relatively new. There's a lot of cool projects. ResearchHub is certainly not the only one, and we want to work closely with a lot of those out there. So it's a non-traditional set of investors, I would say. The big venture capitalists are still excited about, SaaS and AI and like kind of these big topics. But we got to meet some really bright people who, especially in this case at OSS Capital, who had been through the open source movement in a number of different companies and seen how that had built a great amount of value for both customers and shareholders. And so when they saw that ResearchHub was open source and we were doing DeSci, that was like a really cool intersection for them, and they stepped up in a big way. I also want to give a big shout out to Adam Draper at Boost VC. They were another big investor in this round, and Adam was actually, I think he wrote the first seed check in Coinbase back in the day when he and I met in Palo Alto. And, he's always been such a champion of startups, helping them grow and do better. And it was cool to have him, 10 years later, we got to work together on another project. So yeah, Joyce, I don't know, what was your experience kind of meeting with the investor landscape out there?
Yeah, so we met with a bunch of different investors, and I feel like we found like a really good partner in JJ from OSS Capital, Open Source Software Capital. I think like being around people who have been there before building open source projects, and as everybody knows, we're trying to make science more like open source software. So there's a lot of lessons that I think, we can learn from the progression of how like the open source software industry has grown over the past like decade or two and apply that to science. And so, yeah, we're really lucky to now be sitting at a table with a lot of people who have actually done that before and can help to like guide ResearchHub from their insights. So extremely value aligned investors who kind of have the same vision that we do for the future of scientific research. So we feel very fortunate and grateful to have the partnership of those investors.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's like anyone that, even live or recorded, we have the recording up on YouTube already. Our panel from last week can probably already, see that alignment was there. We had an amazing conversation. Some of these topics came out, the alignment between, open science, open software, all the similarities and differences between these different, principles. So I would say absolutely, like I felt it when I was moderating the panel. And talking about, some of these, I would say, things that go together. Something that I wanted to ask you for some time, Brian, I would say like a couple months that I've started to think about this, is that Coinbase has been an early leader in onboarding people to crypto since the very beginning. And now with ResearchHub, we're trying to onboard scientists on this new platform. I would say that scientists are not extremely excited about changing their, the day-to-day operations. And so the more I think about it, the more I think that we're also inevitably onboarding them to crypto as well. And so do you think there's anything that we could learn from your time at Coinbase to make this onboarding to DeSci better to facilitate this process?
Yeah, well, a couple comments on that. So one is that I think crypto is really a generational phenomenon. The largest demographic of people using crypto are in the 25 to 35-year-old age range. And it's, by the way, it's very diverse in many ways, politically, gender, ethnicity. It's really, crypto is for everybody. And there are people who are much older who are using it as well, oftentimes kind of more as like an investment or something like that. They're thinking of it like a brokerage account. But the people actually using crypto for non-investment purposes, day-to-day, payments and capital formation and, decentralized social and all these kind of cool things, decentralized identity, they tend to be in that younger demographic. And so I think in terms of scientists that are going to be early adopters of ResearchHub, it's going to be probably people who are, a few years out of doing their PhD are probably going to be a larger group. And hopefully if we get enough of those, and, they'll grow in their career over time. But if we get enough of them, we'll also get the people who are older and are living on the frontier. I want to make sure we welcome everybody into the community, but that's a little bit of my guess. Another thing that we did really intentionally on ResearchHub is we made sure that the site was useful, even if you didn't really know what crypto was and you didn't have a wallet. For instance, a lot of people might come to the site first and they don't even want to create an account. They just want to browse. Maybe they're reading comments or peer reviews and just using it kind of like to read what's happening in their field. But over time, they might be like, oh, I kind of want to upvote this thing. We prompt them to create an account. Notice we're not prompting them to have to have a crypto wallet. If you had to have a crypto wallet to even participate or create an account, I think, you see that in a lot of Web3 apps where you have to connect your wallet in the top right. We intentionally didn't do that, and we made sure that anybody could onboard. And frankly, they may not even know really what RSC is underneath for a little while. But if they start to participate more and they start to accumulate RSC, at some point they're going to be like, that's interesting. There's an exchange rate. What is this thing? And some people, they'll kind of grow up the ladder with us. So anyway, I think it'll be an important asset for ResearchHub over time to bring in more people and allow them to really participate in the rewards of the community. But it's okay if people don't know what crypto is to start. We got to kind of meet them where they are.
Yeah,
Kind of hop into that answer too, like talking about kind of like the early career academics who are most likely to use ResearchHub. There's actually been, I think, like a really good influence from younger people in academic science where they're kind of questioning some of the like presupposed norms that exist, like peer reviewing for free, and doing a postdoc until you're like 35 years old. And really, like, I think like admirably standing up to make sure that they're compensated for the efforts that they give to the greater kind of like scientific ecosystem. And I think that's kind of similar with like crypto too, where, you know, like I've had a Bank of America account that has charged me overdraft fees and has been like pretty not great. And so like part of the reason that I got into crypto is because of like frustrations with the current like financial infrastructure in the United States. And so I think like the target market of early career researchers can really jump in and be like a great user base for ResearchHub due to their kind of like history of standing up to some of these like kind of nonsensical procedures that exist in academia.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something that ResearchHub does really, really well is interfacing with the scientists. Like the interface feels really easy to use. Like if you browse any other platform, like it really seems easy to use. And so I would say we really had limited problems with onboarding people because like everyone that came to the platform knew already what to do. And in terms of like accumulating this RSC, something that I think is really, really exciting every time I talk to some of these early career scientists, telling them that way when they're actually coming to the platform and they had some of their papers published already, they could come to the platform, claim their papers, and the RSC, there was an RSC bucket waiting for them there. So it's kind of like a reward for discovering this platform and starting to engage with the community. So I feel like that's also something that you have them sitting there. So maybe you spend some time on the platform, you want to learn more, and then that's how you get into crypto more as you're using the platform. So absolutely. Maybe something that I just saw the tweet that you put out, Brian, a few weeks ago about about ResearchHub, about what you I would say you don't like about how science is done nowadays. So maybe there were several points that you made. So maybe a few that I wanted to touch upon is that you mentioned the need for scientists to focus on high risk, high reward kind of breakthroughs that could potentially translate into real products. How do you see this shift in research occurring? Is there any potential benefits that you see in this?
Yeah, well, I do think that unfortunately science today is kind of disconnected from true market forces. And there's kind of this false economy, if you will, based on citations and tenure and things like that, that's driving people's behavior. And you see it show up where a lot of research papers, just to be blunt, it's like they aren't really, they're very incremental. They're not useful. Almost nobody reads them in the whole world, right? There's millions of papers published every year. A lot of them are just trying to help somebody get their PhD or, achieve the next checkbox in their career. And it's kind of considered to be like a mark of shame if you work on something for 6 months or a year and you get a negative result or whatever. And it's like, oh, so of course it creates risk aversion. People want to choose something that they already know is going to work or, to advance their career. So that's really dangerous. If you look at areas of the economy where we've gotten really rapid innovation, like in software or technology and things like that, it comes from people being okay with a certain percentage of failure because you're able to try a lot of different things. And so you try more ambitious things, knowing that even if only 10 or 50% of those things work, it'll make up for the other losses. So that is a very entrepreneurial innovation mindset. I think we need to bring more of that to science. And I think ResearchHub can help with that because, if you're putting out work and it's not, it doesn't get into some journal based on, this anonymous set of 3 peers who may or may not have their own interests, but you get to the top voting in that hub based on a community of experts and it's crowdsourced, right? That's really exciting. It sort of gives you more immediate feedback. It's more democratic, you could say. The thing that has the most stars on GitHub or the most upvotes on Stack Overflow, I trust that more than, what it says in some textbook or what one supposed expert says, right? So one other area that I think we need to do to fully connect research to a market economy is that when people do create major breakthroughs that have commercial applications that can really benefit people like CRISPR or something like that, I mean, they should have huge financial upside in that, right? Unfortunately, university funding, tech transfer offices, things like that, they're not really set up that way right now. And so it's kind of a rare thing when one of these breakthroughs does happen. My hope is that ResearchHub over time can actually be a place where people publish research. There is we should have like a one-click tech transfer office that's like, here's the common license. Just like in open source, we have the MIT license, or for creative people, we have the Creative Commons license. There should be like a standard, or in Y Combinator, there's the SAFE, like the standard terms, right? There should be something like that for people who want to start to publish science on ResearchHub and say, if anybody wants to license this to create some sort of commercial product from it, here's a standard terms. Maybe you share whatever 1% of the revenue with me. And then the people who actually are generating these breakthroughs, they should become fabulously wealthy from it, and be able to invest in the next generation of science. So I'm hoping we can do some things like that over time. And we're not there yet. It'll take a while.
Pat, anything else you want to add on that?
I think it all boils down to financial incentives. Like right now, the way that you get grant funding is by doing these kind of like small, conservative, incremental studies where you already have like preliminary data that suggests that like the end result will actually work. And this is, just a result of how research grants are currently structured. We have a user who is interested in quantum biology and is seeking funding to study quantum biology. And this is a topic that like certain niche experts think is really interesting, but it's very hard to convince a panel of 20 experts on or within the NIH to agree with that. And so just the NIH is really unlikely to fund a very like exciting, risky study. And the result of that is we don't get a lot of really like exciting, risky studies. And so the beautiful thing about crypto and what we're trying to do with ResearchHub is tweak financial incentives in order to maximize the productivity of the capital going into research. And kind of like Brian said, like part of that is like trying risky, exciting things. So we'll be able to like use evidence-based metrics in order to allocate capital in a way that actually like increases the total like value of knowledge produced by the community. So yeah, attacking the financial incentives at the core of the problem, I think, is the really exciting thing that we're doing with ResearchHub.
Yeah, 100%. And like we're seeing this with, and I'm going to get into that in a moment, but with the paid peer review initiative that we just get started in our ResearchHub, we basically are kind of validating the idea that, changing the financial incentives could help us even like reduce the time that we get from the preprint to the actual publication, But do you have anything in mind to assess how some research is helping people? Because like obviously one effect of trying to prioritize anything that could potentially translate into products is that you risk having basic research kind of like falling behind. That is also really important for science, obviously. So is there any way, do you think, like, again, this could be like thinking out loud, potential ways to assess what could what could some ideas do in terms of like helping people in the future?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. And we certainly are fans of basic research. We want that to continue as well. One thing I would say is that I think even some basic research has more directly applicable there's many things that it may enable 50 or 100 years from now that we can't fully contemplate, but there's also something that might be useful like in the next 5 or 10 years, right? Like, I don't know if people consider CRISPR to be basic research, but that kind of had more immediate implications. Or let's take like particle accelerators or something like that, where it's like, I don't know, this is helping us understand the fundamental nature of the universe. What's the commercial application? Well, I mean, I just met with like a startup, a few weeks ago that's actually trying to use particle accelerators to build the next generation of semiconductor fabs to get like lower wavelengths of light, right? Than it can be done with traditional lithography. So I don't know. I mean, that's an example of a company that would probably want to license some of this tech. Now, I don't want to overstate that case. There certainly could be people that purely want to dream about fundamental issues in the world, or not issues, but like the nature of the world that we live in. And I think there should still be a market for that. They should still do that. So the upvoting mechanism, which is just a measure of like how excited are people in the world about what you've discovered. If you discover gravity or whatever, some fundamental thing that doesn't have a near-term commercial application, but people are like, their mind is blown. I think that's great too. And you're still going to get a lot of upvotes and a lot of RSC for that. So I think it'll work out. And we want to welcome both basic research and like things that are more near-term commercializable. But Joyce, how do you think about it?
One like case study that I think about a lot here that I think illustrates the value of basic research is the development of Taxol, which is a chemotherapeutic drug. This was discovered by a dendrologist, someone who studies trees, because it's basically a compound that acts as an antibacterial within like the tree bark of just some random tree. I think it was in Australia. And so this was like a basic scientist who's just studying trees. They find this compound, and it turns out this compound's like actually great at like killing like certain types of cancer cells. And so this compound ends up being monetized by like a company where the person who discovered the initial compound didn't see any of the financial upside. So I think like making sure that the basic research that ends up producing some kind of like valuable product is tied to that eventual reward will again like create financial incentives for the basic researchers to be like kind of focusing on stuff that they think might actually be like productizable eventually and create something better in the world. So I think again, broken record here, but financial incentives where the people who discover the stuff that is valuable get paid for that discovery. So yeah, Taxol is a great case study and kind of like how we can financially incentivize basic research in a way that's actually productive for like the economy and world as a whole.
I think what you just mentioned is the key. Having this process where you can tie all the pieces together, because you don't know, like you're probably doing some basic research. You don't know what's going to happen in like 20 years, but then in 20 years, something happens and that was because of your research. So you want to have a chain of all the events that concatenated and that made that product actually be able to get into the market. And so if you have that chain, you can then like, have all of the rewards kind of like trickle down to the scientists that, started the research in the first place. So as you said, just having all of these events tied together is probably the key.
It's a lot better than having a bunch of citations 20 years later. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of like, this might be a weird example, but like Getty Images, where if you're a photographer and you're just going about your life and you're taking photos of this cool location, this interesting person, like, and you're just putting out this inventory, inventory of different material that you've photographed. And then, maybe 20 years later, something happens, like, some big world event, a tsunami happens there, and they need a photo of that person at that time, and boom, your licensing revenue like just went up by 10x. But you have to have like a portfolio of different things out there. So I'm hoping that there's many scientists out there in the world that in the near future where they're just observing things, discovering things all the time, and they're putting out, hey, this material has this kind of property, and this thing, people will start to get hits on it. Not because of like they met each other physically at some conference, but just because, ResearchHub has become a Schelling point where this material is there and instant connections can happen between people who've never met each other in real life.
Absolutely. And you gave me a couple hints, Brian, so I have to ask you, you talked about materials, you talked about excitement, the LK99 saga. That was something that I've never witnessed in my life. All the online community started to talk about science. My feed was like full of just like floating rocks for 2 weeks. That was really exciting. And I never saw honestly the public coming together to discuss science so much. There was so much exciting about science. Is there something that ResearchHub can do to foster even more of that online collaboration in the future? Because that was just like amazing to see, honestly.
Yeah, well, Joyce, you should jump in here again too. But I think that was a great indication of where science is going, which is that it's not about waiting 18 months to get your paper in some journal and like stuffy boardrooms and whatnot. It's like science is going to start to happen faster and faster. And that's the mission of ResearchHub, is to accelerate science. We saw this, by the way, with COVID too, Operation Warp Speed. Like once there was an imperative, you're not going to wait to get some, journal to review it. Like, I'm going to publish the thing this week. You're saving lives, right? And potentially, and people will comment. And so anyway, how do we take that to the next level with ResearchHub? Well, okay, it's not just about social media and sharing links. It's like, how do we actually get a more like open science platform to take place? How can we share the real data sets, right? How can we run the code behind that? How can we do peer review right in that? How can we get funding flowing through the platform for high potential research? And so this is where, I think social media has demonstrated the need for this. And a dedicated open science platform can actually add in all the additional functionality to make it even better and 10x it from there. So I don't know, those are a few of my thoughts.
Yeah, so the semiconductor excitement, it reminded me of a couple of years ago. There was another group that had claimed to like come up with a room temperature semiconductor or a superconductor, and the way that it was debunked was someone shared a preprint on bioRxiv, kind of analyzing their data and criticizing the data. It was actually like a 4-sentence preprint saying, "I don't know about these results," and then that preprint kind of like exploded from there. But the thing that I think is really exciting about the LK99 example is like, it wasn't a scientist on a preprint server who was validating the findings. There was like a startup in California, there was a cat girl in Russia, it's like regular people, can participate in kind of the scientific endeavor. And the beautiful thing that's happening now, I think, is like, we're realizing that. And it's no longer just like the ivory tower who can participate in these types of discussions. Real people can participate and find out if like their reality matches what exists in the journals. And I think that's the really exciting thing about LK99, and where ResearchHub can step in to help make it, financially sustainable for just a random person to participate in this process.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't get a breakthrough, unfortunately, but what we got is a conviction that science can happen online just as fast as you can communicate with a tweet and so on. Obviously, for all of that, we need validation. And something that I need to touch on is we also need some sort of reputation to make sure that we can spot whoever has experience in the field. Obviously, that does not exclude anyone that wants to come into the field, but we need to recognize whoever has some specific credentials because they've studied, because they've produced research in that specific field. So how important, I know you Brian, mentioned one of the 10 things that you're most excited about is on-chain reputation. And so we at ResearchHub are also really excited about reputation in the context of academia and science. How do you think maybe these two tie together, but also how important do you think reputation is in general in science?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. Blake and I, or Joyce and I, were just talking about this in the prior meeting, but yeah, so I think it's very important for ResearchHub to incorporate a concept of reputation and really expertise around different topics, not just in general and how I meant it about on-chain with ENS, but actually like around certain subjects. So for instance, Joyce got his PhD in one subject, but he's like also studied a certain molecule, and you can kind of go down as deep as you want. And we're kind of playing around with a mock-up of a profile page on ResearchHub where every user can sort of have like, you can imagine like a miniature bar graph of each, like someone's like a 9 out of 10 on epigenetics, but they're like a 4 out of 10 on computer science or whatever. And you can kind of develop that based on both their publishing history, but also like if they've commented or peer reviewed other papers and gotten upvotes on it. Those kinds of things lend themselves to like a credibility or expertise score. So that's a pretty exciting thing that we could add in over time and start to make the way that we score things today is like every user's vote counts the same, but I think it should over time probably be like a weighted average type voting based on their level of expertise and their reputation on ResearchHub.
And the thing that I find most compelling about our approach at ResearchHub is like Brian and I, like, we don't know the best way to do this, right? Like we're really lucky in that we can like take the opinions of our user base and kind of like iterate on how like real world contributions and contributions on ResearchHub translate into a reputation score. So we're really lucky in that like we have people in our community right now who are telling us how we should take these like metrics that exist in the world and translate it to a reputation score. And we plan to do that forever in order to like continually iterate and make sure that like the scientific community has a say in how their like research outputs are judged and rewarded.
And it needs to be dynamic because metrics changes. I hope that our scientific metrics change it will change in the future. So metrics change, the way we do science change. So this reputation should also change. And you said something really important, Brian. It's important to take into account, all of your certifications, all of your, degrees and so on. But it's also important to take into account the activity that you might have on a platform like ResearchHub, because I think about citizen scientists. They don't have maybe a prestigious affiliation, but they do engage with science and they might know a lot about a specific topic. So they need to have their own reputation on the platform as well. And so ResearchHub is kind of like giving them the opportunity to build their reputation online as you would do, which is like interacting with other people knowledgeable about, a specific field. So that's also, I think, really, really exciting about ResearchHub, the inclusivity of like bringing these people on the platform, people that know a lot and people are just learning and getting started on their track.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that sums it up. Honestly, I wanted to touch on, these points. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our community, maybe?
Just please help us spread the word. If you're already a ResearchHub member, please share it on social, go talk to a couple of your friends that can come in and help make these hubs even more vibrant. And if you're passionate about it, apply as an editor and help us curate more content. We'll be uploading kind of as many of the preprints out there that we can. And so we have broad coverage, but we also need to know from your point of view, what are the latest things that you're excited about to keep improving the quality of the content, make it deeply scientific, and make sure it's, the initial core group that we have today, we have to kind of help you. We need your help to curate the content so it gets to the next level and the next level and stays high quality.
I just got a last minute question. So if you don't mind,
okay. I got to wrap. Yeah.
Okay. So just quickly, in next 2-3 years, where do you want to see ResearchHub?
Oh, well, there's lots of good stuff on the horizon. I mean, I think it'd be great to get capability around like Jupyter notebooks in there, data sets, funding capabilities, having kind of like a ResearchHub Pro account where for people who want to, bring their entire lab into the lab notebook and have other benefits on the site. So anyway, there's a ton of things we could do, but yeah, it's early days for sure.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Brian. It was really a pleasure to have you. So we'll ask for another Fireside chat again next year for SciCon 2024. But again, really a pleasure. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Patrick. And see you soon.